Hey everybody, Eric Switzer for the Gamer. Welcome back to Your Favorite Game. Joined today by your favorite co-hosts, George Foster.
Hello.
And the game's editor-in-chief, Stacey Henley.
Hello, hello.
He did finger guns and immediately regretted it and had to say it out loud.
Yep.
Welcome to the show. Today we're talking about your favorite game with Troy Baker. I like, this is our fourth episode of Your Favorite Game, and we have done four very different genres for very different types of subjts.
This is kind of the opposite of last week's, really.
Yes, because there's a very finite list. there's an IMDb's worth of options here, and to be fair, it is a long list. Troy Baker's a very interesting video game figure because he's in everything, right?
Yeah.
It is the closest that we have to a star, a video game star, which I don't really think is a thing. And I don't even know if he would consider himself a star of video games, but he has starred in a lot of video games.
Yeah, I think the other ones you'd put on his level, like Laura Bailey is the obvious one, are buoyed a little bit by things like Critical Role as well. I think Troy Baker, I know he's on side projects, he's in things that aren't video games, but I think he is a pretty everything that has made him famous has come from video games.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to play to have played video games for any period of time and to have not played as Troy Baker or met Troy Baker.
Right.
He's the new
Matt Mercer. Mercer is very famous, but he's probably more famous
100%
for his show than for any games he starred in. Nolan North, good example, but at this point, Troy Baker is far more prolific than Nolan.
Yes, I think Troy Baker's overtaken him. I think Nolan North was probably the earliest star of games in terms of acting cast. But I think Troy Baker's probably just surpassed him. It would be fun to look at some of the other big stars. And when I was doing research for this, there was some games that I didn't realize Troy Baker was in. I'm sure if we did that for the other people, we'd find that as well, mind.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, if you have played games, you have definitely played a game that Troy Baker was in, whether you knew it or not, right? And sort of an interesting thing that differentiates him from the movie star that we'll get into is, even though he's got leading roles in so many games, he still shows up even to this day as, various voices in whatever random game you've never heard of. Like he's basically doing the role of like an extra as the Brad Pitt or whatever of video games. It's pretty interesting how different those industries are. There's so many games I want to talk about, but I don't want to step on anyone. So I think we should just get right into it. And I think this week we'll start with Stacey. Stacey, what is your favorite game with Troy Baker?
So my favorite game with Troy Baker is Shadow of Mordor.
That's not what I thought you would pick.
No,
you never talk about this game.
No, I really, really love this game. And the reason I've gone for it is because it was one of those ones that fulfilled the... I'm surprised it's Troy Baker. I think... I don't know what you guys are going to pick. It would be very easy, I think, to pick The Last of Us. He's great in he's Joel. He's great in The Last of Us. But everyone knows he's Joel. It's a big, big role of his. I think with Shadow of Mordor, it shows off, a little bit of range for him. It's very impressive, I think. He is a real voice actor. There's some people who are voice actors because they can do one voice very, very well. That's not a criticism you could lay at Troy Baker's feet. He sounds different in a lot of the games that he's in.
Yeah.
And I think the performance and the story of Shadow of Mordor are really underrated. He plays Talion, who's the main character. Obviously, his the deal with Shadow of Mordor is Talion is embodied by Celebrimbor Scores, I think that's how you say it. So there's a little bit of a role-sharing thing going on, but I don't care about Lord of the Rings. Right? I mean, I've seen all the movies, I think. I don't think I bothered watching all the Hobbit ones. Might have. I don't love it the way a lot of people in the world do and a lot of people at the site do, but I really love Shadow of Mordor. It's one of my favorite games of that era, and certainly my favorite thing that Lord of the Rings has ever done. And I don't think it gets talked about a lot. When people talk about Shadow of Mordor, what they discuss is Shadow of War wasn't as good, which is correct. The Nemesis system should have been used by more games, which is correct. I know it can't because Warner Brothers has patented it. Apparently it's back in Wonder Woman, which is also correct. Like, that should have happened. But I think...
And that it's reskinned Arkham.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is true of a lot of games of that era. When I said it was my favorite era, I wouldn't count Arkham amongst that. I think of all those kind of the Mad Max and Arkham and all those other games that were trying to be Arkham, I think Shadow of Mordor, is the best version. And people don't really talk about the story aspect of it enough. People don't really discuss it beyond it. These days, I don't even really hear people say the Nemesis system was cool and like, oh, I killed this orc and then it came back, or I got killed by an orc and it was promoted to guard captain and it was watching me from the walls and stuff. It's just discussed mechanically, and for how much enjoyment I had in that game, I feel that's a little bit unfair. Getting back to Troy Baker, which I suppose should be the focus, it's one of those games where sometimes it feels like less is more, and that's executed really well. I know Troy Baker doesn't write the scripts, I know he just does what he's asked to do, but he is a big star, and we know from other interviews he's done that he's very involved in the kind of creative process of shaping what goes into games. And I think in some of the other Troy Baker roles that we may discuss later on, they're very reliant. We've paid a lot for Troy Baker. We want to get money out of him. And I think Shadow of Mordor, it is quite balanced. It's a great performance from him. It's really tragic without leaning on the kind of gruff stoicism that we see from Joel and another classic character, Booker DeWitt. So you've got this idea, I think, within the game of they're not maximizing their time with Troy Baker. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're not kind of going, okay, we've got Troy Baker now, we need to write a load of stuff so we can make him say a bunch of things because he's really expensive, which I assume he was. Because even back, this came out after The Last of Us. So whatever point you want to say, and after Bioshock, so whatever point you might say Troy Baker became the Brad Pitt of video games, I think he'd made it by this point. I think he's had a decade of it.
Right.
So yeah, from the specific Troy Baker point of view, I picked it because I think it's an underrated role of his. I think people forget about it, and I think the character is just a bit more interesting than some of the tropes he's sometimes asked to play. Obviously, he's also Pagan Min. I know that's controversial in its own ways. His audition story is a strange one. But he feels a little bit sometimes like another Far Cry figure, Giancarlo Esposito, where he kind of gets typecast as you are this thing. And it's really interesting to see Talion, who is part of that vibe. He's not a sad dad in the kind of very specific sense that Joel is, but he's very similar in nature to a lot of those characters that Troy Baker played that you would say are his defining roles, mainly Booker and Joel. But I think I'd be being very generous to Shadow of Mordor to say I feel Talion has more depth than Joel. I don't think that's true. But I think the performance overall is a little bit more... has a little bit of a wider range, or it uses that range with a little bit more nuance than Joel does. A lot of the heavy lifting from The Last of Us is in the power of the script and his relationship with Ellie. So yeah, I really love Shadow of Mordor. It doesn't get enough love, and that's why it's my favorite game with Troy Baker, because I think more people should be aware, one, that he's in it, and two, that it's great.
Yeah, I think that that's a great pick when you talk about his range, because like you said, there's a lot of voice actors that are immediately recognizable because it sounds like Matt Mercer, kind of just sounds like Matt Mercer, right? And he's a great performer. He's got a cool voice, but what makes Troy Baker, what elevates him above so many other actors in video games is that he does have so much range, right?
Yeah.
That he's in stuff that you don't know he's in because you would just never recognize his voice. I feel like even his roles that are very close to what Troy Baker sounds like Joel is just, it kind of is Troy Baker doing like a Southern accent, right?
Yeah.
But you know, that's Joel's voice. Like you never think of it. You never picture Troy Baker when Joel's speaking. Like
no,
it really does become that character.
We compared him to, sorry, quick off there.
No, yeah. Go ahead.
We compared him to Brad Pitt. I think that's true in terms of star level. But the way he approaches some of the roles, it's almost similar to Christian Bale.
Yeah.
If you listen to Christian Bale, who people will know as Batman, he's Welsh. Christian Bale is Welsh. His real accent is quite thick Welsh, but he's done obviously the very gruff Batman voice. He's done the kind of southern drawl. He's done Pittsburgh, which is a really hard accent to do on screen and out of the furnace. And I think Christian Bale has that kind of ability to disappear into a role in the way that I think a lot of big movie stars don't. And it's a little bit easier for Troy Baker, for any video game actor, when they're not being fully face scanned. I know Joe uses mocap, but it's not Troy Baker's face. It's an original face that's planted on over his twitches. Because you don't see him, so it's easier to not know it's Troy Baker when it's Booker DeWitt standing in front of you. But I do think it's impressive. Troy Baker has a little bit of a reputation sometimes for being maybe a little bit cocky, and people don't like successful people in general. So I know that he's not university beloved, but, who is. I think it's pretty hard. However, George, yes, other than George, who else is university beloved? It's pretty hard to look at his body of work and argue that he's not good at this. He's not getting roles because he's Troy Baker. Or if he is these days, which he probably is because he's a big star, he's not phoning it in.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I mean, yes, you can certainly disappear into a role much easier when you're an animated character. And while he does play a lot of middle-aged white guys, like he still does such a great job of becoming who that character is.
He played Pagan Min, who's not a white guy, and then was criticized because he's a white guy playing someone who's not white. So I think sometimes it's tough for him to win with that. I don't know why I'm.
Well, I was thinking like animals or aliens.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Robots.
I think that's fair. I'm not on the kind of hype train that he's the greatest guy I've ever lived. Every game stuff him in, I just it's interesting.
It suddenly occurred to me how the three of us are not the most. It's not that we love glazing people up, so doing a whole episode about how great an actor is is more challenging than I thought it would be. But I sincerely do love all the roles that we're going to talk about.
I think within video games, especially, where we all try to be resistant to the kind of, oh my god, it's that guy, because when you report it, you kind of have to be objective. I didn't, but the Gamer has interviewed Troy Baker before. We interview a lot of kind of voice actors, and there's some who you really, and developers and other things, some who you really appreciate for your work, but I think you have to keep your distance in a way that we don't necessarily have to for other celebrities. Like, I can pretty uncritically just say Taylor Swift is great and not really need to think about it. Mm-hmm. But I can't really do that with anybody in games, whether they're a developer or a actor or anything, because I'm going to have to think about and critique their performances at times, where I can just kind of say, yeah, I like Taylor Swift. I don't need to give you an essay on it.
Right.
But
so
you
I
will
think that's
and
part
can.
of it. I will and can, and yes. There's several links below.
I am surprised that you didn't pick Mass Effect 3.
I would not have been able to say very nice things about his character in Mass Effect 3. I think it's a bad character. I don't think it adds enough to this. It's Kai Lang. Because he plays Mass Effect 3. I think it's very sudden, and I would have gone off on a big tangent about how they wrote out the Thane romance in a way that I feel kind of discredits playing Mass Effect 2 as anything other than either a Garrus romance, which you also shouldn't really do, I don't think, because Garrus gets with Tali in 3, and that takes away from the story. If you play as a straight woman in Mass Effect 2, and you do a romance, there are 3 options for you. Jacob, who gets married in between 2 and 3, so you're out of luck there. Thane, who dies, and who, when he dies, you barely remember him, because when talking about Kai Lang, you mentioned other people that he killed as well. Or Garrus, who has a built-in romance to get with Tali if you don't romance him. So...
Too selfless. You just go Garrus.
I go Thane because I like Thane the best. If I play as Femshep straight, then I would go for... Usually I just go Liara all the way through. I just Liara and then Liara in the Shadowbrog and then Liara at the end. That's my canon playthrough of Mass Effect. This is what would have happened if I'd chosen Kai Lang. Right, I would have just gone off on this rabbit hole about why I don't like Kai Lang, and it's not even a personal thing. I should stress it's not the way that some people don't like Abby. People don't like Abby because Abby killed Joel. It's not a kind of he hurts Thane. I don't like that.
Yeah.
There's this master assassin who's brought in specifically to kill characters off, who's never really given enough time to establish himself. I don't hate him as much as some other people do, but there's no chance, looking at the vast videography of Troy Baker, that I would be picking Kai Lang. Because I like to pick these things not on what's my favorite game that technically fits the category, but what can I talk about most for the reason we're all here.
Yeah. Fair enough. George.
Hello.
What's your favorite game of Troy Baker?
Speaking of middle-aged white guys, my favorite game of Troy Baker is Uncharted 4, where he plays Sam Drake.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the one that people always forget. You know, you say Last of Us, you say
That's
Bioshock
true.
Infinite. That's the third big one. That's his other breakout role, I'd say. Well, he was kind of there by then, but that's his other big one.
2016, Uncharted 4.
Yeah, I was
so
17?
kind of following on from that.
Yeah, and for me, I love all the Uncharted games. Yeah. I think I honestly think it's Naughty Dog's best, and I say that as someone with a stupid Last of Us tattoo. I think Uncharted's better, in my opinion. Uncharted 4 narratively is the best one by far.
Yep.
There is no doubt. That. I think it's the best one in every sense of the word, to be honest.
Very controversially, I think Uncharted is Naughty Dog's fourth best series, by the way.
Oh, we'll get back to that.
Just dropping that in there.
But yeah, I love Uncharted. Uncharted 4 is my favourite. All of its narrative centres around Sam.
Yeah.
It only works if Sam works. To do a big rug pull and say, oh, he had a brother the whole time, and that's why he's never mentioned him, and that's why he never uses bloody grappling hooks, because it reminds me of his brother, probably. That's why that doesn't happen. To do that successfully and not have you go, yeah, okay, Naughty Dog, you have to make Sam likable. And for the events of the story to play out like they do, so his betrayal and redemption, for that to work, he has to be a likable character. And even though Troy Baker, we've talked a lot about how, sometimes he is just doing a Troy Baker voice. And in this, I'd say that is probably his most just Troy Baker voice that he's doing. But to play the character like he does, to make him this mix of, the older brother who knows everything that's happening, and also he's like Nate, but he's more experienced, but he still has the jokes, but he's got the experience, and he's like an advanced version of him in a way, but he's also, you get the sense that things aren't quite what they seem. To pull that off, I don't think anyone else but Troy Baker could have done it.
Yeah, this is a slightly East Coast Troy Baker as opposed to Southern Troy Baker. But I think it's, Uncharted 4 is a great game for a lot of reasons. But when we talk about the third sequel in a series introducing the long lost brother, it feels like that could very easily fall flat.
100%.
And I think it's definitely a testament, to the writing and to how great that game is in other ways, but also to Troy Baker's performance, that he really brings a cool character to life that could have definitely sucked.
Mm.
And I think Sam's mocapped as well, right? So it's a true performance. He's acting, not just voice acting.
To nerd out for a sec, I remember when Uncharted 4 was being teased and all the trailers coming out. As someone who was at the time more enthusiast than I would say I am now, as someone who works in the industry. Yeah, back in sixth form, it would have been. It was like Nolan North and Troy Baker. They're finally together in a game. 2 stars co-leading it. That was cool for me.
Gino
to
and
nerd
De Niro.
out. Yeah, well, sure. If that's a film example, but
yeah.
What do you mean if that's a film example? You've not heard of Al Pacino and Robert De Niro?
Well, I know who they are, but not.
All right.
Massively.
Okay.
I'm young. Leave me alone.
They've only been in 4 films together. It's a big deal whenever they get together.
Oh, okay. I don't think that Nolan North and Troy Baker have been leads in a game since. They're obviously, if they both do a lot of, like Eric said, extra work. I'm sure they're in a lot of the same
Troy
games.
Baker will be in the background of one of the Assassin's Creed games or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Like they've been around, but I think having those two unite for that, I think that's just really cool.
Yeah, me too.
I do too. And that Sam is so likable despite, sort of being the evil twin brother that shows up in the fourth act, and just a real scoundrel of a guy, right?
Yeah.
Just a duplicitous, cowardly, kind of like a wormy guy, but is so damn likable.
Yeah.
In that game. And that definitely feels like a Troy Baker effect.
And in was it Lost Legacy? Is that what it's called? The Uncharted 4? Yeah, he's great in that as well. Seeing him return, you wouldn't think that after he's been in one game, you'd be kind of like, yeah, Sam's back. But you are. Like when you see him pop up, it's like, oh, this is great. I would love a Sam spin-off game. Totally. Like I'd be more interested in that than continuing Nate's adventures. I don't think it'll
be Nate, but I think it'll be one of the women. I don't think it'll be Sam if they go back to it. But I'm not even sure they will. I think they might just do a new thing.
Yeah,
Sam would be fun. But I think like their dynamic is what makes it so fun, because he really positions Nathan to be like such a Boy Scout, and almost to an obnoxious degree, where it's like he always has to do the right thing,
Yeah,
and it recontextualizes who Nate is.
I love their scene when they finally get to Libertalia. Obviously, at that point, it's cost Nate so much, so it's not really as much of a victory as he would have imagined it. And then Sam's trying to mess around with him, like he's playing with the swords, and he's interacting with all the bits. And just the way they got on there, as someone who has a brother, it feels very brotherly. They just nailed it.
Yeah.
So, Eric, what's your favorite game with Troy Baker?
My favorite game with Troy Baker is Death Stranding.
Oh.
Yes.
Good choice.
Troy Baker plays the villainous Higgs Monahan.
So
may or may
dumb.
not be his real name. This is an outrageous game, and this is an outrageous character. One of the most outrageous characters of all time. The head of a terrorist organization, but the twist is that he's not actually the head of a terrorist organization. Spoilers. He is basically the prophet of the Antichrist. So imagine the most evil dude ever, right? The America's like futuristic Bin Laden, but actually he's even more evil. It is ridiculous. He wears a golden mask. He teleports around and he just sort of tortures people. He just does like wacky villainous stuff that makes no sense. At one point he wears a disguise, pretends to be a client, and gives Sam a nuclear bomb to deliver.
I forgot about that. And it's so obviously him as well.
And it's so obviously him. Yeah, just the most outrageously... And he's the kind of villain you have to love because you don't really understand his motives at all. It seems like he doesn't have any. He's like the Joker, which is another Troy Baker character.
Yeah.
We'll touch on. But yeah, just an outrageously evil dude, and it's so fun. That story is such nonsense from beginning to end, and often frustrating in how nonsensical it is. But I never once felt out of step with Higgs. Like I got his deal, and it never bothered me that I didn't understand why he was doing the things he was doing. He's the bad guy. When you fight him at the end, he says, "I guess this is the final boss battle." Like he's the bad guy, and that's it. That's all you need. And sometimes, like that's what Kojima is great at. Like I know other writers that use subtext and they're all cowards. that whole thing. And I just feel like Kojima and Troy Baker were like synced up with this character. They both totally knew what this was, and it works. It's the best character in the game, but it's the most entertaining. Whenever Higgs is on screen being Arch is when that story is its most entertaining.
I will never forget watching the Death Stranding 2 trailer, and then he's back somehow, not explained, and he just has an electric guitar that he's just shredding on. I think we were watching it together, Eric, and I think you were just howling with
losing
laughter.
it. Yeah.
It's an interesting one for Baker, especially as well, because if you look at the cast of Death Stranding, they're not really video game people. They're all celebrities, Lea Seydoux and Daryl Dixon isn't his real name.
Dixon.
Norman Reedus.
Norman Reedus, thank
Represent.
you. So there's so many, and obviously the new Alfan in the new one as well.
And directors too, not just actors.
I hate
Del Toro's in there as well, George Miller. So you've got like these big film characters for film stars from the world of film, and then Troy Baker's kind of elevated to that status.
Right.
I don't think, knowing Kojima and his kind of meta-textual, it's very important that you kind of know these characters outside of the world for it to work, for him to say a boss battle meta. I don't think that works if it's Johnny voice actor.
I agree.
It needs to be Troy Baker or Nolan North or somebody on that level for it to effectively sell this idea. Obviously, there's a quality level with Troy Baker as well. Kojima has the money to go and get the best, so he goes and gets the best. But I think on the meta level that Kojima is really always operating on, but I think maybe most noticeably now that he can do the face scans so perfectly, I think having it be Troy Baker is a really, I guess, underlines what we've been saying about him operating this fairly unique space as a, not recognizable, because my mum wouldn't know who he was, but, fairly recognizable character in the world of video games, where most people in the booths have been kind of anonymous underlings for a lot of video games' existence. Charles Martinet was not a huge figure in the 90s because he was Mario. It's a recent thing that we've cared that he's Mr. Mario. He's not anymore, but that's
100%.
That's the thing that's been brought in by the celebrity status of people like Troy Baker.
Yeah. And the fact that he is in this roster, there's a better word for it, cast of Hollywood A-listers and I guess big time directors, but the point that he is not just elevated to their status by being in a cast with them, but is actually gives the best performance in that whole game, right?
I think it's so funny to see the dichotomy between Norman Reedus' performance, which is very
subdued.
Yeah, I think that's a nice word for it. Whereas, Troy Baker's given it his all. Like, he's going full, like, theatrical mode for it.
Yes,
it's great.
Yeah. He's being a cartoon character.
There was an interview not too long ago, before Death Stranding 2 was announced, where Norman Reedus leaked it, and he mentioned something about, like, Kojima showed me, and it's nothing like Pac-Man. Like, he's very of that kind of sphere of, he doesn't really he can't kind of, I guess Jim the camera is the word I would use, like in the office. He can't kind of give you a little wink, like, oh, that's a video game thing. Because he doesn't know video games. He doesn't understand them. Like, every single thing that, like, this is the boss battle. Troy Baker is fully aware of how video games work. He knows how people play them. That's the thing. The way that he works to make Kojima works, it might have been something that he said, it would be really cool if I said this. And Norman Reedus just doesn't have the ability to do that. Norman Reedus is reading lines. I know he's, again, it's a face scan, so there's more kept going on. I know she's in a booth kind of blindly reading lines. But he's not in a position where he can creatively work on this because he doesn't really understand the medium. And that's part of the deal if you want to cast big name stars. I can't imagine Lea Seydoux as a nerd. I can't imagine she's got like a high score on. Yeah. She really hates Kyle Lang as well. She's really passionate about preserving her romance with Jacob. I think having a video game guy in a Kojima game is kind of necessary for the experience, right?
Yeah. I think, and in particular, having him play the villain, I think he anchors the rest of that cast, and it almost feels like there's a dialogue between him and the player because and because he's familiar, because he belongs in video games while all these other people don't.
Death Stranding would be noticeably worse if you were to flip Troy Baker and Norman Reedus round. Yeah, even though you spend more time with Sam, it would be a worse game because that. And you can say that with a lot of games. If you swapped around Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, then The Last of Us would be worse if you had, Troy Baker playing a 13-year-old girl. Yeah, obviously, sometimes when you change roles, games get worse. But I think considering they're pretty similar people,
it's supposed to be
it's a big thing.
I'm you after a bad day kind of crap. That's kind of how it's played. And it's not to make this a non-readers thing, but he is a very good actor. I personally just think Sam's supposed to be played as, Death Stranding's a lonely, meditative game. It would almost work with no dialogue. Would be my argument.
I mean, a lot of it is. Yeah. 99% of the time you're playing that game is no dialogue.
Damn, that would have been a good choice. But anyway,
except for the 2 hour
there's too much dialogue in there, so
yeah. Okay. There's so many more roles to talk about. His first leading role, does anyone know?
Would it be Catherine?
His first role, I think, was Blood Rain, but I don't think it was as a lead.
That was his first. Yeah, his first major role was
Final Fantasy?
Brothers in Arms.
The war shooty bang bang one.
Yeah, Brothers in Arms is a war game. It's got Brothers in Arms.
It could be about passionate families.
Brothers with arms.
Brothers with arms. Both Booker DeWitt and Joel were the same year, 2013.
2013,
yeah.
So he led the 2 biggest games of 2013. And that
I was going to say carried. That's not fair in The Last of Us, but he is the pillar of both those games. I think he's not just the kind of faceless.
Yeah.
Sometimes the lead character, as we just said with The Last of Us. As we just said with Death Stranding, sometimes the lead character is not the reason you're playing. I don't think that's true with either of those. I know people like Elizabeth, but I think Booga's a really important part of that game.
We touched on Talion. Delson, infamous Second Son.
Yes.
Oh, no. That's a good choice. I would have... instant regret.
Yeah, I know that's like the lesser of the 3 infamous games, but I quite like it.
I really like it. It's probably my least favorite out of them, but I still think it's a great game. Just comparing it to 2 10s doesn't make it like a lesser thing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess technically it does, but you know what I mean?
I'm not having that the first infamous is a 10 out of 10, mind.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Real ones, no.
He is Magni in God of War, which is kind of a small role, but one of those that you wouldn't think of. He's also the Maw from The Medium. I can't remember if we talked about The Medium this week or last week.
We talked about The Medium last week, and yes, he is. He's one of the scenes I was trying to think of, the big foreboding voice when you're inside the kind of blood library.
Yeah.
Just kind of screams at you. I thought that was a weird choice at the time to have him there.
Yeah.
Not his best hour, I don't think, but I think maybe that's more to do with The Medium overall.
He's also one of the voices for the boss in Saints Row, the 3rd, and I believe the 4th as well, and he's great in that. Because again, he goes
I
silly
always play
with
as
it.
Laura Bailey.
I think I always went with the British voice, but I still liked Troy Baker's one.
Yes, we touched on Pagan Men in Far Cry 4. He has played... This was interesting. I had no idea about this. He's played Gul'dan since Warlords of Draenor in World of Warcraft. Gul'dan...
If any of us is going to know that would be you.
Yeah. Gul'dan... So, like, if you've seen the Warcraft movie,
yeah.
Gul'dan is the villain. So Gul'dan's a very important character, and obviously he's been around long before Troy Baker took over, so he wasn't always the voice of Gul'dan, but I thought that was really interesting. I mean, Gul'dan's been dead for a while, so he's not been in the game or whatever, but he's Simon Krieger in Miles Morales.
Yes, I think that's one of his weaker roles. That's the bad guy who owns the plant where Miles gets his powers from. Yeah. I think Miles Morales has weaker villains than Spider-Man, both 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Krieger's a pretty flat character, not aided by anything Baker can do. That I think not unsalvageable, because I still like Miles Morales. I think it's a great game, but I think Krieger is probably the single weakest part of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I forgot he was even in it, to be honest. I think of Finn and I think of Christmas.
Yeah, Miles is a tough one. They're trying to sort of like siphon off Peter's villains and make some of them more core to Miles.
Rhino.
Yeah. In the book, his most famous villain is just like a robot of him. It's just a clone of him.
I love that you said in the book as if it's like a 19th century novel.
In the comics, he's also a vampire now. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
He got turned into a vampire, and he is still a vampire. Like even after that event ended, Miles Morales is just a vampire now. I know
it'll be a cool skin in Spider-Man 3. I'm sure.
Yeah,
there's no chance that comes into the game.
No. Back to Troy Baker. He plays Bruce Banner in the Avengers.
Yes.
He's really good in that.
Marvel's Avengers one.
He's a very good Bruce Banner.
We've had a lot of takes on Bruce Banner, and I think that was kind of an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
And then no one will know this game but me, but the Infinity Blade series. Anybody?
Right. It rings a bell, but I don't know.
Doesn't ring a bell for me at all. Is that a VR game?
No, it was a mobile game. It was Infinity Blade was important for a few reasons. It was an epic game. It was the first mobile game on Unreal 3, and it was a non-microtransaction trash game. This was a first-person sword fighting game where you would swipe in different ways to do sword combat, and it was a roguelike. And they did 3 of them, and he was the voice of the main character, and those games were awesome. That was the first, and that was at least 10 years ago, but that was the first time I played a mobile game that I was like, oh wow, mobile games can be real games. You know what I mean?
Fruit Ninja for me.
Right.
Plants vs. Zombies for me.
Okay, this is interesting. So he has been Batman, both in a few of the Lego Batman games and the Telltale's. He's Telltale.
Yes, Telltale's Batman.
Mm-hmm.
He is also Joker in Arkham Origins.
Mm-hmm.
He's also played all 3 main Robins. Yeah. So he played Tim Drake in Arkham City. He played Nightwing in Injustice. And then he played Jason Todd, in Arkham Knight. Yeah,
it's a new character that you've never heard of before. No, it's not. It's going to be Jason Todd. No, it's a new guy. We swear.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool. Batman, the Joker, and all 3 Robins. Now I know it's not. There's more than 3 Robins.
Yeah, but they're the 3.
It's 3 Robins. It's 3 Robins.
The 3 main Robins.
I knew Batman and Joker.
And he can't play Jamie in.
What's he called? I knew he was Arkham Knight. Didn't know the other ones.
Yeah. No. He's unfortunately he's aged out of Damien, so I don't think he'll get to all the Robins.
Yeah.
Can we talk about a little drama? I feel like if we're going to talk about Troy Baker, we got to talk about a little drama.
Go on.
He's had some famous gaffes that are pretty funny. They're worth mentioning. I think
so.
We have spent a whole episode kind of bigging up his performance. So yeah,
there's 2 main ones I could think of that are both very funny to this day. Probably the biggest one would be the Teddy Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena.
Man in the arena.
Do you remember what that was in response to?
I do. George is usually better at this than me, so I'm going to let George guess.
No,
first.
Actually, I'm blanking. I'm going to assume it was criticism towards Was it it wasn't the Bitcoin thing, was it?
No.
We'll get.
Yeah, that's the second faux pas. No, tell me.
This was Jason Schreier saying that The Last of Us Part 2 was about 5 hours too long.
No. Close. Very close. Jason Schreier tweeted, "Video games are too long."
Oh, yes. Yeah. It wasn't actually about that, but it was about The Last of Us.
I love it so much. So if you haven't seen this, it's just he tweeted, "I'll just leave this here," and then a screenshot of a very long Teddy Roosevelt quote.
Courage is not the man on the sidelines. It belongs to the man in the arena. Something like that.
Yes. It is not the critic who counts.
Yes.
It's the man in the arena. Essentially just saying like the people who critique games don't matter. The people who make them do.
They don't build statues of critics.
They don't build statues of critics. Yeah. Because Jason Schreier tweeted, "Video games are too long." I love that so
Which is
much.
a totally fair response to like The Last of Us Part 2, a game that is infamously too long. A game I love, but if there's one critique you can make of The Last of Us Part 2.
Imagine a more milquetoast, a more like, and could there possibly be a more innocent criticism of anything?
And it's also like universally beloved. This is not a game that got mixed reviews. No game you have to kind of come out swinging for.
That's the other thing. Yeah,
You know, he's in Fort Solis, which we reviewed kind of poorly. This is not a game like that. This was 90s, 95, 6, something on Metacritic. Universally adored game, The Last of Us.
Yes.
And I think if you're going to be that spiky about it,
I know, and Druckmann does this
I don't
too.
know, like, I don't know what makes you happy, I guess.
Yeah. You can't take like the most mild criticism possible of the most popular game ever in 2020, right? Like, geez, dude, calm down, and maybe it's just a sort of kind of an out of touch how social media works kind of moment, but
I think there's definitely a version of that where he just kind of thinks it's funny. There was a kind of I hasten to say Twitter war because it makes me sound incredibly mature and like I care about these things. But there was a Twitter war not so long ago between Hard Drive and Jeff Keighley. And you could tell that Keighley wanted to be part of the fun, but he didn't really know how to do it properly. So he just ended up kind of doubling down and getting roasted for reaction GIFs that you would have used like 8 years ago. And I think that's probably part of it with Baker. He's not a prolific social media user. Probably sets up the next thing I'm going to talk about. Mm-hmm. So I think he's just a little bit didn't realize that it would be widely mocked and thought that was just kind of like a zinger back, and it wasn't. Surrounded by yes men Hollywood types, what happens to you?
Right. That's how it comes across. Like a guy that's so famous and gets so much smoke blown up his ass that he can't take one very mild criticism that wasn't even directed at him.
Yeah, it's nothing really to do with him.
It had nothing to do with him at all, right? Yeah. The other one that is very funny, that he probably the most backlash he's ever gotten in his life, probably a life-changing moment for Troy Baker, I can imagine, is when he partnered with VoiceVerse NFT.
Yep.
That was it, not Bitcoin.
Obvious scam, an obvious evil company, and then within
real Simon Krieger of a company.
within hours, I'm not sure.
I think it was days.
Yeah, it was revealed that the VoiceVerse NFT, in fact, was stealing people's voice work and repackaging it, pitching it up or something. So the idea was, it was an NFT, right? But instead of a little picture of an ape, it would be dialogue.
Something more valuable.
Yeah, and then they would get different actors and then you'd be able to own this. Oh, I own this voice line. Except while they were marketing it, they were taking like Laura Bailey quotes from some game or whatever, and then like pitching it up and then being like, this is what it'll be like. Instead of just making the thing they said that they're making and selling, they faked it to promote the project,
which is especially weird when they had Troy Baker.
when they had Troy Baker. So there's a couple of reasons it's funny. One is maybe not so much in 2020. No, I'm giving him too much credit. In 2022, we knew NFTs were a scam and bullshit. So one, it's funny because obviously VoiceVerse NFT is a very stupid idea. Two, it was immediately revealed to be a scam. And three, the way that he revealed it to the world. I'm going to read the tweet if you don't remember. I'm partnering with VoiceVerse NFT to explore ways where together we might bring new tools to new creators to make new things and allow everyone a chance to own and invest in the IPs they create. We all have a story to tell. You can hate or you can create. What'll it be?
God.
I do remember that line now. It's very reminiscent of The Man in the Arena.
It is.
That's my sign-off from
obviously
now
an
on.
ethos for him.
Right.
If you two ever critique me again, that's what I'm saying. You can hate or you can create. Good
it's
opinions like mine.
It's of course you would use that to describe an NFT, right? You can hate or you can create. Buy my new NFT. It's so funny.
I think if you take out the invest and own your own IP, that is the exact pitch that's being used today for, we have AI in this thing now.
Yes.
It's just, they just go around in circles and circles.
New grift, different day.
Now,
you can hate it, you can create.
To his credit, he got a bunch of shit. He said, "You've all given me a lot to think about," and then he dumped this company. And I say to his credit because he could have, I guess, doubled down on this NFT stuff and become an NFT guy, which would have been a worse outcome. But also, I think that he is probably a person that cannot take any kind of backlash at all.
I think when you work as a celebrity in gaming as well, it's very easy to pick out people who love you. There are a lot of fans in gaming who just kind of love it. Maybe it's not journalists, but other than that, love kind of everything involved in gaming and will kind of rapturously give you praise. George is waving at the fact he doesn't love.
No, I don't love everything. Yes.
But I think Troy Baker has gone his whole life, certainly the last kind of 10, 15 years. I loved you as Joel. I loved you as Booker. I loved you. Miles Morales is my favorite game. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he's probably insulated from a lot of the other stuff, as the Last of Us thing kind of showed. It but only got through because it was a really, really high-profile journalist. So
yeah,
it's I struggle to feel sorry for people who are paid vast amounts of money to do an incredibly rewarding and entertaining job. But I do think those kinds of people are in odd positions, and it is interesting when they are met with a real change to that, how they react. And I think Baker probably reacted as best he could have to that happening, even if probably very, very foolish to have had that happen to him in the first place.
Right.
I agree.
Okay, last thing to touch on, upcoming game, of course, Indiana Jones.
Yes, he's in it.
Troy Baker is Harrison Ford. And this is an interesting one because, when he took over Gul'dan, he had to do an impression. He had to do a Gul'dan voice. But that was somebody doing another character. Indy is just Harrison Ford. It's not really... Harrison Ford is not a character actor, right?
No.
And when Baker plays Indiana Jones, he is just playing Harrison Ford, which is kind of interesting.
Ford's face.
And it's Harrison Ford's face. So I don't know of another role he's done. When I look through them, that's anything like this, where he's playing a real person or playing someone else's character, other than Gul'dan.
He sounds pretty good though. From what I've heard, I briefly was tricked into Eric. You look like you disagree. No.
I'm just thinking about the distinction between an impression and a performance, and how it has to be both in this case, right?
I would say an impression, you'd be repeating the dialogue, but a performance is taking that character and doing something new with it, would be my definition.
And I think you have a little bit more room for comedy with the impression. The closest I can think of, he is specifically Mark Hamill's Joker. He's not a new Joker. When he's Joker in Origins, he is Mark Hamill's version of it, and he has to match that.
Yeah.
He does a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And it seems like George is right. It seems like he is doing a good indie as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Any other ones I missed? Anything else you want to touch on? Baker in the Bakerverse?
I think we didn't really say that much about The Last of Us or Bioshock, but we mentioned Bioshock 2 weeks ago, and we mentioned The Last of Us. We mentioned The Last of Us for Zombies as well, so we've done both. I think we know those are his key roles. He's great in them. So no, I think
Joel more than Booker. Just because we keep playing Last of Us over and over, I guess, because they keep releasing it over and over, and it's been 10 years since I've played Bioshock Infinite. And I can hear Joel in my head right now, and I don't know if I can really hear Booker or really put my finger on who Booker was.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, no, I can't.
But definitely great roles in important parts of both of those games, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, that is our favorite games with Troy Baker. What's your favorite game with Troy Baker? Let us know in the comments on Twitter. Come to my house. Shout through my mail slot.
Don't do that with me.
Please don't do that. That is it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell and visit us at thegamer.com. That's The Gamer, no spaces.